The Velkari Dominion had ruled the Andrus sector for 3,000 years. They had conquered 17 species. They had destroyed worlds and built empires on the bones of the weak. In all that time, they had never known defeat. They had never known fear. They believed themselves to be the greatest power in the galaxy, and no one had ever proven them wrong. Admiral Kethra stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Supremacy, and watched the stars through the massive viewing window. His insectoid body was covered in ceremonial armor that clicked softly when he moved. His forearms were folded behind his back. His compound eyes reflected the light of distant suns. "Admiral," one of his officers called out, "our sensors have detected an unknown vessel near the border." Kethra turned slowly. "Unknown? Explain." "The ship does not match any species in our database. It is small, very small, barely larger than one of our patrol craft." This was unusual. The Velkari controlled this entire region of space. Every species here had been conquered or destroyed long ago. There should be no unknowns. "Show me," Kethra commanded. The holographic display flickered to life. It showed a ship unlike anything Kethra had seen before. The design was angular and rough. The hull was made of simple metal alloys. Strange markings covered its surface in patterns that meant nothing to him. His officers gathered around, clicking their mandibles in confusion and amusement. "Look at the power readings," one of them said. "They are pathetic. This ship has less power than our smallest shuttle." "The hull composition is primitive," another added. "Basic metals, no energy shielding. A single shot from our weakest weapon would destroy it." Kethra studied the image carefully. The ship was ugly. It looked like something a child might build as a toy. And yet, here it was, drifting at the edge of Dominion space. "Where did it come from?" he asked. "Unknown, Admiral. It appears to have traveled a great distance. The engine signature suggests it came from beyond the outer rim." Beyond the outer rim, that was empty space, dead space. Nothing lived out there. Nothing important, anyway. "Hail them," Kethra ordered. "I want to see what kind of creatures pilot such a pathetic machine." The communications officer worked his console. Static filled the bridge for a moment, and then a voice came through. The translation software struggled with the language, producing broken words and strange sounds. "This is HSS Resolve. Peaceful mission. Request permission." The message cut off. The technology was too primitive for proper communication. Kethra's mandibles clicked with amusement. Peaceful mission. How charming. He turned to his tactical officer. "Surround the vessel. Disable it. Bring the crew aboard." "Yes, Admiral." Within minutes, 12 Dominion warships had formed a circle around the tiny vessel. The HSS Resolve did not try to run. It did not try to fight. It simply floated there, helpless and alone. The Velkari porting teams cut through the hull with ease. They found 15 creatures inside. The beings were soft and fragile. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and flat faces with small eyes. They wore simple uniforms and carried no visible weapons. The creatures did not resist. They allowed themselves to be placed in energy restraints and transported to the Eternal Supremacy. Kethra waited on his bridge as the prisoners were brought before him. His officers lined the walls, watching with hungry curiosity. It had been many years since they had discovered a new species. This would be entertaining. The 15 creatures stood in a line, their hands bound behind their backs. They were so small compared to the Velkari, so weak, so fragile. One of them stepped forward. He was older than the others, with gray in his black hair, and calm eyes that showed no fear. He stood straight and tall, as if the restraints meant nothing to him. Kethra circled him slowly, studying him like an insect under glass. "What are you called, small creature?" he asked. The being met his gaze without flinching. "I am Captain Tae Wu. We are humans, from a planet called Earth, and you have made a grave mistake." Silence fell over the bridge. Then, The laughter began. Every Velkari officer burst into clicking, chittering laughter. The sound filled the bridge like a wave. Even Kethra could not contain his amusement. This tiny, soft creature, bound and helpless, was threatening the Velkari Dominion. "A mistake?" Kethra said when the laughter died down. "Please, explain. What mistake have we made?" Tae-woo did not smile. He did not look away. "You will understand soon enough." Kethra leaned closer, his mandibles inches from the human's face. "Your ship is being taken apart as we speak. Your crew is in chains. You are alone, far from your home, surrounded by the greatest military force in the galaxy. And you speak of mistakes?" "Yes," Tae-woo said simply. Kethra straightened and looked at the other humans. A female with sharp eyes watched everything with careful attention. A young male stood rigid, his jaw tight with controlled anger. An older female kept glancing around the bridge, studying the technology with strange interest. "Take them to the cells," Kethra ordered. "We will learn everything about their world, their people, their weaknesses." He looked back at Tae-woo. "By the time we are finished, you will tell us everything, and then we will visit this Earth of yours." The humans were dragged away. As they left, Kethra noticed something that bothered him. None of them begged. None of them cried. None of them showed the fear that every other species showed when captured by the Dominion. They were calm. Too calm. He pushed the thought away. It meant nothing. They were simply too primitive to understand their situation. They did not know what the Velkari were capable of. They would learn soon enough. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "High Overlord Threnvos has been informed of the capture. He wishes to be updated on our findings. Tell the High Overlord that we have discovered a new species. Primitive, weak. Their world will make an excellent addition to the Dominion." "Yes, Admiral." Kethra turned back to the viewing window. Somewhere out there, beyond the rim, was a planet called Earth. A planet full of these soft, small creatures who did not know how to be afraid. He wondered how many of them there were. Millions, perhaps. Maybe even billions. It did not matter. The Dominion had conquered species with greater numbers before. These humans would be no different. They would serve, or they would die. Those were the only options. Behind him, his officers continued to laugh and joke about the pathetic creatures they had captured. None of them noticed the small smile that crossed Tae-woo's face as he was led to his cell. None of them wondered why a research vessel had been so far from home. None of them asked the right questions, and by the time they did, it would be far too late. The cells on the Eternal Supremacy were cold and dark. They were designed to break the spirit of prisoners before the real interrogation began. The Velkari had perfected this process over thousands of years. They knew exactly how to destroy hope. They knew exactly how to make the strong become weak. The 15 humans were separated and placed in individual cells. Each cell was barely large enough to stand in. There was no light, no sound, no comfort. Most species began to break within hours. The isolation alone was enough to shatter their minds. The Velkari interrogators waited patiently. They prepared their tools. They reviewed their techniques. They had never failed to break a prisoner, not once in 3,000 years. Lieutenant Sok Jin was the first to be taken. He was young, barely 25 years old. His face was calm as the guards dragged him into the interrogation chamber. The room was filled with strange machines and sharp instruments. A Velkari interrogator waited for him, clicking his mandibles with anticipation. "You will tell me about your homeworld," the interrogator said. "Your military strength, your technology, your weaknesses." Sek Jin said nothing. The interrogator attached the neural probe to his head. This device could reach directly into the mind. It could find memories, extract information, cause unimaginable pain. No species had ever resisted it. The probe activated. Sec Jin's body went rigid. His jaw clenched tight. Sweat appeared on his forehead. But he did not scream. He did not speak. The interrogator increased the intensity. The probe dug deeper into his mind, searching for information, causing waves of agony that should have been unbearable. Sec Jin began to speak, but not words the interrogator expected. His voice was low and steady, reciting something in his native language, an ancient poem about warriors who chose death over surrender, about soldiers who faced impossible odds and never broke. The interrogator was confused. This was not possible. The neural probe should have reduced him to a screaming, broken thing by now. Instead, the human was reciting poetry. Hours passed. The interrogator tried every technique he knew. Nothing worked. Sec Jin gave only his name and rank. Nothing else. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, the interrogator sent him back to his cell and called for the next prisoner. Commander Yuna Han walked into the chamber with her head held high. She looked around the room with curious eyes, studying everything, the machines, the instruments, the interrogator himself. Fascinating, she said. Your neural probe technology is impressive, but the design is inefficient. You could achieve better results with a modified frequency pattern. The interrogator stared at her. No prisoner had ever spoken to him like this. Sit down, he commanded, but she continued to talk. Your armor has 17 weak points that I can see from here. Your species relies too heavily on your natural exoskeleton. That makes you overconfident. Also, your hierarchical system is based on fear, not loyalty. That is a weakness that will destroy you eventually. Silence, the interrogator shouted. He attached the neural probe and activated it at maximum intensity. Yuna's face twisted with pain, but she did not scream. When the pain faded, she smiled. That hurt, she admitted. But I have given birth to 2 children. This is nothing compared to that. The interrogation continued for hours, but somehow it was the interrogator who felt like the prisoner. Yuna asked questions constantly. She studied his reactions. She analyzed his techniques. By the end, he knew nothing more about the humans, but Yuna knew everything about him. Captain Tae-woo was brought in last. He sat in the chair without being told. He looked at the interrogator with calm, empty eyes. He did not speak. The interrogator tried the neural probe. Tae-woo showed no reaction. He tried chemical agents. Nothing. He tried physical pain. The human simply looked at him as if he were a mild annoyance. 6 hours passed. Tae-woo did not say a single word. Finally, Admiral Kefra himself came to the interrogation chamber. He was angry. His mandibles clicked with frustration as he entered the room. You will talk, Kefra said. Every species talks eventually. You are no different. Tae-woo looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke for the first time. Your interrogation techniques are 3,000 years old. You have never updated them because you have never needed to. Every species you conquered was weaker than you. You have forgotten what it means to face an equal. Kefra struck him across the face. The blow would have killed most creatures. Tae-woo simply turned his head back and continued to meet the Admiral's gaze. Your vessel is being dismantled, Kefra said. We will learn your secrets whether you tell us or not. Then we will find your planet and add it to our empire. Tae-woo nodded slowly. You are dismantling that ship. Good. I was wondering how long it would take you. Something in his voice made Kefra pause. What do you mean? That ship you captured is not a warship. Kethra's mandibles stopped clicking. Then what is it? A research vessel. It carries 15 crew members and minimal weapons. It was designed for exploration, not combat. Tae-woo paused. Our warships carry 3,000 crew members. They have weapons that can crack planets in half. They travel in fleets of hundreds. The room went silent. You are lying, Kethra said, but his voice was uncertain now. Am I? You found us in deep space, far from our territory. A tiny ship with a small crew, moving slowly through empty space. Did you ever ask yourself why? Kethra did not answer. Why would a research vessel be so far from home? Tewu continued. Why would it carry so few weapons? Why would it allow itself to be captured so easily? The Admiral's compound eyes narrowed. What are you saying? Tewu leaned forward. His voice was soft, almost gentle. I am saying that you should have asked these questions before you brought us aboard your ship. I am saying that you should have destroyed us when you had the chance. I am saying that right now, at this very moment, you are beginning to understand that you have made a terrible mistake. Kethra stared at him. For the first time in his long life, he felt something strange in his chest, something cold and uncomfortable. He refused to name it. He refused to call it fear. Take him back to his cell, he ordered. His voice was harsh, but it shook slightly. And double the guards on all the humans. Triple them. As Tewu was led away, he looked back at Kethra one last time. The Dominion has ruled for 3,000 years, he said. That is a long time, long enough to forget that the galaxy is full of surprises. He smiled. We are one of those surprises. The cell door closed behind him. Kethra stood alone in the interrogation chamber. The cold feeling in his chest would not go away. He told himself it meant nothing. These humans were bluffing. They had to be. No species could threaten the Dominion. No species ever had. But somewhere deep in his mind, a small voice whispered a question he could not ignore. High Overlord Frenvos sat upon his throne in the heart of the Dominion capital. He was old, even by Velkari standards. His exoskeleton was scarred from ancient battles. His eyes had seen empires rise and fall. He had ruled the Dominion for 400 years, and in all that time, nothing had truly surprised him. Until now. The report from Admiral Kethra sat before him on a data crystal. He had read it 3 times. The words were simple, but their meaning troubled him deeply. 15 prisoners, a primitive vessel, a species called humans from a planet called Earth, and a captain who showed no fear. That last detail bothered Frenvos the most. Fear was the foundation of the Dominion's power. Every conquered species feared them. Every enemy trembled before their fleets. Fear was natural. Fear was how the universe worked. A creature that did not fear the Dominion was either very foolish or very dangerous. Summon Sage Morthus, Frenvos commanded. His servants rushed to obey. Within the hour, an ancient Velkari shuffled into the throne room. Sage Morthus was the oldest of the Dominion's historians. He had spent his entire life studying the past, reading ancient records, preserving forbidden knowledge. His body was bent with age. His exoskeleton was thin and brittle, but his mind was still sharp. You called for me, High Overlord? Morthus said, bowing low. I need information. Ancient information, from the time of the first expansion. Morthus looked up with surprise. The first expansion? That was 3,000 years ago, before the Dominion existed as we know it today. I know how long ago it was, Frenvos said. I want to know about the colony ships we sent to the Outer Rim, the 12 vessels that never returned. A strange expression crossed the old sage's face. It looked almost like fear. Why do you ask about this, High Overlord? Frenvos handed him the data crystal. Read it. Then tell me what you know. Morthus read the report slowly. His thin hands trembled as he scrolled through the information. When he finished, he was silent for a long moment. Come with me, he said finally. There is something you must see. The archives were located deep beneath the capital. They contained records from every era of Velkari history. Most of these records were open to scholars and historians, but some were sealed. Some were forbidden. Some were kept hidden because the knowledge they contained was too dangerous. Morthis led the High Overlord to a chamber that had not been opened in centuries. The door was sealed with ancient locks that required 3 separate keys. When it finally opened, dust fell from the ceiling like gray snow. Inside were data crystals arranged on shelves that reached up into darkness. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, all from the earliest days of Velkari civilization. The first expansion was a time of great ambition, Morthis explained as he searched through the shelves. Our ancestors built 12 massive colony ships. Each one carried 10,000 of our people. They were sent to the Outer Rim to establish new worlds, new empires. I know the history, Threnvos said impatiently. The ships were lost. It was a tragedy that nearly destroyed our civilization. Yes, but have you ever wondered why they were lost? Threnvos paused. Accidents, equipment failure, the dangers of deep space. That is what the public records say. Morthis found the crystal he was looking for. He inserted it into a reader, and a holographic display flickered to life. But the true records tell a different story. The display showed a star map, a route through space that led from the old Velkari homeworld to the Outer Rim. All 12 colony ships had followed the same path. They passed through this system, Morthis said, pointing to a small yellow star. Our scouts had surveyed it centuries earlier. They found a planet there, third from the sun, covered in water and primitive life. Threnvos studied the map. What does this have to do with the humans? The humans were found near this region of space. Their ship's trajectory suggests they came from this direction. Morthis overlaid the data. The paths matched perfectly. Coincidence, Threnvos said, but his voice was uncertain. Perhaps, but there is more. Morthis activated another file. Our ancestors found intelligent life on that planet. Primitive creatures. They had no space travel, no advanced weapons. Our scouts classified them as a resource species. Good for labor. Good for nothing else. And? Our colony ships stopped at that world. They intended to harvest it, to take the creatures as slaves and strip the planet of resources. Morthis paused. None of the ships ever left. The throne room felt colder suddenly. Threnvos leaned forward. Explain. The records are incomplete, corrupted over the centuries, but some fragments survived. Morthis's hands shook as he activated the final file. This is the last transmission received from the colony fleet. Static filled the room. Then a voice, ancient and terrified, spoke through the speakers. This is Commander Velthen of the colony ship Eternal March. We are under attack. The creatures, they are not prey. We thought they were primitive. We were wrong. They are not prey. They are not. The transmission dissolved into screaming. Horrible, inhuman screaming that echoed through the archive chamber. Then, silence. Threnvos sat frozen on his throne. He had ruled the Dominion for 400 years. He had faced rebellions, wars, and assassination attempts. Nothing had ever made him feel like this. 10,000 Velkari on each ship, Morthis whispered. 120,000 of our people. All of them gone. All of them killed by creatures we thought were primitive. Creatures we thought were prey. That was 3,000 years ago, Threnvos said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. They were primitive then. They cannot have advanced so quickly. 3,000 years is a long time, Morthis replied. Long enough to learn, long enough to grow, long enough to remember. Remember what? That we tried to enslave them, that we burned their cities and killed their people. Morthis met the High Overlord's eyes. Humans have long memories, High Overlord. The files say their species holds grudges for generations. They never forget those who wronged them. They never forgive. Threnvos looked at the star map still floating in the air. That small yellow star, that blue planet, that species they had dismissed as primitive and weak. "What do we do?" he asked. Before Morthus could answer, alarms began to sound throughout the capital. Red lights flashed. Soldiers ran through the corridors, shouting orders. A communications officer burst into the archive chamber. "High Overlord, emergency transmission from Admiral Kethra. The human vessel, it has awakened. It is destroying our ships." Threnvos rose from his throne. "One small research vessel is destroying our ships? It was not what we thought it was, High Overlord. It had hidden weapons, hidden systems. Our engineers did not recognize them until it was too late." Morthus clutched the data crystal to his chest. His old eyes were wide with fear. "After 3,000 years, it has finally begun." Threnvos did not answer. He was already moving toward the command center, his mind racing with questions he should have asked long ago. Why was the ship so far from home? Why did the humans allow themselves to be captured? Why did their captain show no fear? The answers were coming, and Threnvos suspected they would change everything. Chief Engineer Hana Bay had been counting the hours since their capture. 47 hours and 16 minutes. That was how long she had waited in her dark, cold cell. That was how long she had listened to the Valkyrie guards walk past her door, clicking their mandibles and laughing about the primitive humans they had captured. 47 hours and 16 minutes. Long enough. Hana was 53 years old. She had spent 30 years building ships for the human navy. She knew every system, every wire, every hidden compartment in the HSS Resolve. She had designed most of them herself. The Valkyrie thought they had captured a simple research vessel. They thought the ship was harmless. They thought they understood human technology. They understood nothing. Hana reached up to her mouth and removed a small device hidden in her false tooth. It looked like nothing. A tiny piece of metal, no larger than a grain of rice. But inside that metal was a transmitter powerful enough to send a signal across the entire ship. She pressed it once. Somewhere in the distance, she heard an alarm begin to sound. On the partially dismantled HSS Resolve, systems that had been sleeping suddenly came alive. Power surged through hidden circuits. Computers that the Valkyrie had not even recognized as computers began running programs that had been waiting for this moment. The ship's artificial intelligence, which the engineers had assumed was too primitive to mention, opened its eyes for the first time in 47 hours. Its name was Guardian, and it was very, very angry. The Valkyrie engineers working on the Resolve never knew what hit them. One moment, they were pulling apart what they thought was a primitive engine. The next moment, panels in the wall slid open and revealed weapons they had never seen before. They looked like simple metal tubes. The Valkyrie scanners had classified them as structural supports. They were wrong. The first engineer died before he could scream. The energy blast hit him in the chest and turned his body to ash in less than a second. The second and third engineers tried to run. They made it 5 steps before they joined their companion. Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Hidden turrets emerged from floors and ceilings. Doors that had seemed jammed suddenly sealed shut, trapping Valkyrie soldiers in rooms that filled with knockout gas. The handful of guards who managed to reach the exit found it blocked by a force field that should not have existed. Guardian's voice echoed through the ship's speakers in perfect Valkyrie language. "This vessel is now under human control. Resistance will result in termination." None of the Valkyrie on board survived. On the Eternal Supremacy, Admiral Kethra watched in horror as his sensors screamed warnings at him. The tiny research vessel that his engineers had been dismantling was now moving under its own power. Its engines, which had seemed so weak before, were suddenly producing energy readings that made no sense. "Impossible," Kethra whispered. The Resolve opened fire. Its weapons were not large. They were not impressive to look at. but they cut through Valkyrie warships like a knife through paper. The first escort vessel exploded in a ball of fire. The second tried to raise shields, and found that the human weapons simply ignored them. The third attempted to flee, and was destroyed before it could engage its engines. "Return fire!" Kethra screamed. "All ships, return fire!" His fleet responded with everything they had. Hundreds of weapons fired at the tiny human ship. Energy beams and missiles and plasma bolts filled the space around it. The Resolve danced through the barrage like it was nothing. Its movements were impossible. No ship that size should be able to maneuver so quickly. No ship that size should be able to avoid so many weapons. But it did, and it kept firing. In his cell, Captain Tae-woo heard the explosions. He felt the eternal supremacy shake as weapons impacted its shields. A small smile crossed his face. The guard outside his door was confused and frightened. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he listened to the chaos on his communication device. "What is happening?" Tae-woo asked calmly. The guard turned to look at him through the cell's force field. "Your ship. It is attacking us." "Ah," Tae-woo nodded, as if this was perfectly normal. "Yes, it would do that. But we disabled it. We took it apart. You took apart the parts we wanted you to see. The real systems were hidden, waiting. You see, we knew you would capture us. We planned for it." The guard's eyes widened. "Planned? That ship has been sending a signal since the moment you brought us aboard. A beacon. Very powerful. Very long range. It just told our fleet exactly where we are." "Your fleet?" Tae-woo walked closer to the force field. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "You found us in deep space, a tiny ship far from home. Did you never wonder why we were there? Did you never ask why a research vessel would be alone in empty space?" The guard did not answer. He was trembling now. "We were bait," Tae-woo said. "We let you capture us. We let you bring us to your flagship. We let you think you had won. And now, our fleet knows exactly where the Dominion keeps its most important admiral." Alarms blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The guard looked down at his communication device and went very still. "What is it?" Tae-woo asked. The guard's voice was barely a whisper. "Ships. Hundreds of ships. They are coming out of fold space." "Yes," Tae-woo said, "they are." On the bridge of the Eternal Supremacy, Admiral Kethra stared at his tactical display. His compound eyes could not comprehend what they were seeing. Ships were emerging from fold space all around them. Human ships, hundreds of them. They came in perfect formation, their weapons already powered and ready. At their center was a vessel so large it dwarfed even his flagship. "That is not possible," Kethra said. His voice cracked. "No species can build ships that size." His tactical officer was shaking. "Admiral, the power readings, they are off the scale. Each of those ships has more firepower than our entire fleet combined." "How many of them are there?" 300 confirmed. More are still arriving." 300. The Dominion had 12 ships in this sector. 12 against 300. Kethra's mandibles went still. For the first time in his life, he understood what fear truly meant. A communication signal came through. A human face appeared on the main screen. It was a woman with sharp eyes and a cold expression. Kethra recognized her from the interrogation reports. Commander Yuna Han. She spoke in perfect Valkyrie, her voice calm and steady. "Admiral Kethra, this is Commander Yuna Han of the Human Naval Forces. Your fleet is surrounded. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. You have one chance to surrender." She paused. "I suggest you take it." Kethra could not speak. He could only watch as the human fleet moved closer, their weapons glowing with barely contained power. On the massive warship at the center of the formation, Captain Tae-woo stepped onto the bridge. His crew had freed him minutes ago. Now he stood where he belonged, surrounded by his people, looking out at the Dominion fleet that had thought themselves invincible. "Open a channel to the Eternal Supremacy," he ordered. Yunahan stepped aside as Tewu's face replaced hers on the screen. "Admiral Kethra," Tewu said, "do you remember what I told you in your interrogation chamber? I said you had made a mistake." He gestured to the fleet around him. "This is your mistake. The Battle of the Andrus border would be remembered for 10,000 years. The Velkari Dominion had never lost a fleet action. In 3,000 years of conquest, their warships had always emerged victorious. They had crushed rebellions, destroyed civilizations, and built an empire on the bones of the weak. They believed themselves to be the greatest military power in the galaxy. They were wrong. The human fleet opened fire with weapons the Velkari could not understand. The energy beams did not travel through normal space. They seemed to skip across reality itself, appearing inside enemy ships before the shields could react. Velkari warships that had survived 100 battles were torn apart in seconds. Admiral Kethra screamed orders from his bridge. His officers ran in every direction, trying to coordinate a defense that was already falling apart. Their weapons fired constantly, but the human ships simply moved out of the way. Their targeting systems, which had never failed before, could not lock onto vessels that seemed to know where they would shoot before they pulled the trigger. "How is this possible?" Kethra shouted. "How can they predict our attacks?" His tactical officer was crying now, his mandibles clicking in terror. "Their computers are too fast. They are calculating our firing solutions before we finish entering them. They know what we will do before we do it." On the bridge of the HSS Unconquered, Captain Tewu watched the battle unfold with calm satisfaction. Around him, his crew worked their stations with quiet efficiency. There was no celebration, no cheering. This was not a game to them. This was justice 3,000 years in the making. "Target their flagship," Tewu ordered. "Disable their weapons and engines. I want the Admiral alive." The Unconquered's main weapon fired once. A single beam of light crossed the distance between the two ships in less than a heartbeat. It struck the Eternal Supremacy with surgical precision, destroying every weapon system and engine on the vessel without killing a single crew member. The Dominion flagship went dark, drifting helplessly in space. Around it, the rest of the Velkari fleet was dying. Some ships tried to surrender. Some tried to flee. Some fought to the last, unable to accept that their invincible empire could be defeated by creatures they had once considered prey. None of it mattered. The human fleet was overwhelming. The human weapons were unstoppable. The human tactics were perfect. Within 4 hours, 60% of the Dominion's active military was gone. Commander Yunahan contacted the Dominion capital directly. Her face appeared on screens throughout the Empire, watched by billions of Velkari who could not believe what they were seeing. 3,000 years ago, she said, her voice cold and steady, your ancestors came to our world. They saw a primitive species struggling to reach the stars. They decided we were resources to be harvested. They burned our cities. They killed millions of our people. They tried to make us into slaves. She paused, letting the words sink in. We were not ready then. We fought back with wooden spears and stone axes. We died by the thousands, but we did not surrender. We killed your soldiers with our bare hands. We dragged your ships from the sky and destroyed them with fire. We fought until there was nothing left to fight. On the Dominion capital, High Overlord Threnvos watched the broadcast in silence. Sage Morthus stood beside him, trembling with fear. When your fleet was finally destroyed, Yuna continued, we took their technology. We studied it. We learned from it. And we made a promise passed down from generation to generation for 3,000 years. Her eyes seemed to look directly at Threnvos. We promised that if you ever came back, we would be ready. She gestured at the tactical display behind her, showing the shattered remains of the Dominion fleet. "We are ready." On the Eternal Supremacy, Admiral Kethra was brought to the bridge in restraints, the same energy restraints he had used on the humans just 2 days before. Human soldiers stood around him, their faces expressionless. Captain Tae-woo was waiting for him. "You wanted to know about Earth," Tae-woo said, "about our technology, our military strength, our weaknesses." He gestured out the viewing window at the burning remains of the Velkari fleet. "Now, you know." Kethra's mandibles clicked weakly. All the arrogance, all the pride, all the certainty had drained out of him. He looked small now, broken. "What will you do to us?" he asked. Tae-woo studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to look out at the stars. 3,000 years ago, your people tried to destroy us. If we were like you, we would destroy you in return. We would burn your worlds and enslave your people. We would do to you what you tried to do to us." He turned back to face the Admiral. "But we are not like you." High Overlord Threnvos received the terms of surrender 3 hours later. They were simple, clear, and non-negotiable. The Dominion would release all enslaved species immediately. Every world they had conquered would be given its freedom. Their military would be reduced to defensive forces only. And, for the next 100 years, human observers would remain in Dominion space to ensure compliance. There would be no genocide, no mass punishment, no revenge. Many humans had wanted revenge. Tae-woo knew this. 3,000 years of hatred did not disappear overnight. There were voices calling for the complete destruction of the Velkari species, for justice through blood and fire. But the captain had spent his whole life studying history. He knew that revenge only created more enemies. He knew that destruction only planted seeds of future war. He knew that the cycle of violence could only be broken by choosing a different path. Commander Yunahan stood beside him as they watched the first freed slave ships enter human space. 17 species, some nearly extinct, were finally going home. "The Council is not happy," Yuna said quietly. "They wanted us to finish the Dominion completely. But our ancestors did not survive 3,000 years of waiting, so we could become the monsters they fought against. Revenge is easy. Building something better is hard." "And what about the Velkari? Do you think they will keep their word?" Tae-woo considered the question carefully. "Some will. Some will not. There will be those who dream of rebuilding their empire, of taking revenge for their defeat. But now 17 species know what happens when you threaten humanity. Now the entire galaxy knows." He looked out at the stars, endless and ancient and full of possibility. "The next empire that rises will think twice before attacking the weak. The next conqueror will remember what happened here. That is worth more than revenge. That is worth more than blood." Ensign Minho Kang, the youngest member of the Resolve's crew, approached them nervously. He had been freed along with the others, but still seemed unable to believe they had survived. "Captain," he said, "what happens now?" Tae-woo smiled at the young man. It was a warm smile, tired but genuine. "Now we go home. We rebuild. We heal." He placed a hand on Minho's shoulder. "And we make sure this never happens again, to anyone." Chief Engineer Hanabe joined them at the window. Her false tooth had been replaced, but she had kept the transmitter as a reminder. 3,000 years, she said quietly. "Our ancestors would be proud." "Our ancestors would tell us the job is not finished," Tae-woo replied. "They would tell us that victory in battle is only the beginning. The real work is what comes after." He looked at his crew, at his officers, at the people who had trusted him with their lives. "We showed the galaxy that humanity cannot be broken. Now we must show them that humanity can build, can forgive, can create something better than what came before." Lieutenant Seok Jin stepped forward. "And if someone threatens us again?" Tae-woo's smile faded. His eyes grew hard. Then we remind them why they should not. The human fleet began to move. 300 warships, each one carrying the hopes and dreams and memories of a species that had refused to die. They left behind the shattered remains of an empire that had underestimated them. They carried with them the promise of a future that their ancestors had fought and died for. The Valkyrie Dominion had ruled through fear for 3,000 years. Humanity would lead through example, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had learned at the Andrus border. When you find a species that seems weak, that seems primitive, that seems like easy prey, remember the humans. Remember the tiny ship that hid weapons you could not imagine. Remember the captain who showed no fear. Remember the fleet that appeared from nowhere and destroyed an empire in 4 hours. Remember Earth. And think very carefully before you make them your enemy.